Going to do about it.
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good morning to you and welcome to The Briefing. Today it's leadership, leadership, leadership. Today the nominations open and close at 6 p.m. We'll find out which candidates are on that first ballot and which are getting booted out. All that is at 6 p.m. We'll explore what's going on in the leadership contest today with some launches as well. All to come after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 9:31. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The country will have a new Prime Minister by the 5th of September, with voting opening for the new Conservative Party leader tomorrow. Nominations will open and close today, with each candidate vying for the job needing at least 20 supporters. Well, ballots of Conservative MPs will then whittle contenders down on Wednesday and Thursday until there are just 2 candidates. The final 2 will then face a series of hustings before Conservative Party members choose a new leader. Well, the Labour Party, though, has said it'll put forward a motion of no confidence in Boris Johnson's government today. The opposition have repeatedly said that Boris Johnson should have left Number 10 immediately after he resigned as Tory leader last week. If the vote goes ahead, all MPs can vote on whether the Conservatives stay in power. If the government loses, it could trigger a national election. In other news now, the government's announced a £1 billion plan to rebuild 61 schools. In James Cleverly's first announcement as the new Education Secretary, he said schools would receive state-of-the-art refurbishments. MPs have voted to allow agency workers to replace striking rail staff. It comes after train drivers at 8 rail companies voted to take industrial action in a dispute over pay. The ASLEF union says strikes are the last resort, but they've been forced to act due to the rising cost of living. The Met Office has issued an amber alert for extreme heat for this Sunday. The alert covers most of England and parts of Wales, warning of possible dangers to life or serious illness from the heat, as well as disruption to travel. This week could see the hottest weather ever recorded in the UK. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's head to the briefing with Tom.
Good morning, it's 9:33 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, nominations in the contest to choose our next Prime Minister open today and close at 6 p.m. One contender who's already surpassed the 20 MP threshold is former Chancellor and current frontrunner Rishi Sunak. He formally launches his campaign today, and one prominent backer who will be there at the launch event is the former vice-chair of the Tory party, Andrew Bowie, the Conservative MP for West Aberdeenshire and Kilcarden. Welcome to the programme, Andrew. First of all, you declared your backing for Rishi Sunak yesterday. What led you to that decision?
Morning, Tom. Well, look, I thought that Rishi was the only serious candidate running to become leader of the Conservative Party. He's the only one with a plan to tackle inflation, the only one with a plan to grow the economy so that we can ultimately get to a position to cut taxes. He's been tested in the heat of the coronavirus pandemic, leading our financial response, saving 11 million jobs through the furlough scheme. And I think that gives him exactly the platform that we need for somebody to go on and become a great Prime Minister. And that's why I'm backing him to become leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party today.
There is a lot of criticism levelled at Rishi Sunak. A lot of the other candidates in this race are saying that taxes need to be cut first. In fact, Sajid Javid said just yesterday, a former Chancellor himself, of course, that it's quite wrong to suggest that you need to wait for growth to cut taxes. It's the other way around. You need to cut taxes to get growth. Is he wrong?
Look, I would never be in a position of saying that another candidate is wrong, but Norman Lamont, one of the most transformative chancellors in recent history, agrees with Rishi Sunak's plan. And if you read William Hague in the Times this morning, he suggests that Margaret Thatcher herself would be casting a very suspicious eye over some of the plans to cut tax unveiled by the other candidates. Look, Rishi is a serious, competent challenger for this position. He has delivered as Chancellor of the Exchequer. He has a serious plan to deal with inflation, get us to a place where we can cut taxes. And by the way, in raising the national insurance thresholds, he's actually taken £330 off the tax bills of most people in this country anyway. So to say that he's not a tax-cutting conservative is frankly ludicrous. He is, but we can go further when we've got the economy under control.
Well, let's move from tax to inflation now, because, of course, we do have very high inflation. We had high inflation under the former Chancellor's watch. And initially the response from this government wasn't to look at supply-side reform, wasn't to change the mandate of the Bank of England, encouraging higher interest rates. Instead, it was to print or indeed just give money to people, £37 billion of extra spending to deal with inflation. Is that particularly sensible?
Look, I mean, this is the Chancellor, Rishi was Chancellor at the time. We had a cost of living situation on our hands. It was absolutely incumbent on the Chancellor then to do what he could to support working people through the crisis, hence why we're taking £400 off of people's energy bills, hence why we're taking £150 off of most people's council tax, hence why we're taking £330 reduction in their national insurance contribution through the raise in the national insurance threshold. So we took a lot of action at the beginning of this year to deal with the cost of living situation that was facing people in this country, and we will do more, but we can't go further and recklessly cut taxes when we haven't got the basis of a sound economy on which to do that. And that's why Rishi Sunak is my candidate for leader, because he is the only one with a serious plan to get us to that stage.
We're talking so much about the economy and about taxes, but of course there are other issues that really matter to the country as well. No candidate seems to have been speaking about how they would deal with crime. No candidate has seemed to raise the issue of immigration. Only one candidate seems to be talking about the issue of the online harms bill and free speech. Does Rishi Sunak have anything to say about these other issues?
Rishi Sunak is going to be launching his leadership officially at 11 a.m. this morning. I recommend you watch that, Tom, and I'm sure you'll get answers to all of those questions. But of course, he was in the cabinet that delivered more police on the streets of this country. He was in the cabinet that delivered a sound plan for dealing with illegal immigration and clamping down on the pernicious activity of people smugglers into this country. And indeed, he'll be the Chancellor that unveils a sound economic plan to get taxes down. So I think on all of the questions you raised, that Rishi will be answering those later today, and I recommend you watch.
Well, Andrew Barry, I will be there at the launch event, so hopefully we'll get to ask some of those questions myself. But thank you very much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning. Really appreciate your time, and see you there a little bit later. Well, that was Andrew Barry there supporting Rishi Sunak. Now, to return to yesterday, a day can be a very long time in Westminster, especially in the midst of a leadership campaign. So here's some of the events that you may have missed yesterday. The relaunch of the Thatcherite group, Conservative Way Forward, in the Churchill War Rooms, provided the platform to some of the candidates in the party, the prospective leaders, of course, to outline their priorities. Steve Baker is chairing the group, not a candidate himself. He's backing Suella Braverman, but he had this to say.
That the troubles we face today arise because the government has spent too little. Does anyone here really believe that it's because taxes are too low? Do you think we've run government surpluses too often for too long? Well, of course not. Perhaps you think interest rates have been too high for too long and not enough QE. The present crisis that we have in the United Kingdom and around the world, these crises, they're not crises of a free society. They are crises everywhere of power, of too much political interference in our lives. And we need to be absolutely clear about that as things go forward and deepen. Because
well, Steve Baker there setting out his vision for how to get the country back on track. Someone else who was there was Nadhim Zawahi, the current Chancellor and leadership contender. He outlined his mission to lower taxes.
Let me just say a few words on that. The people need to keep more of their money and let them choose, of course, how to spend it. Today, I can announce that as Prime Minister, I will cut the base rate of income tax to 19p in 2023, 18p in 2024. And that will give households back £900 a year on average. You will note, I'm not saying that households will save £900 on average. Families can't save what has been taken from them. And we need to be very clear about that when we talk about income tax.
Nadeem Zwahi there. The other leadership candidate was Attorney General Suella Braverman. She took the opportunity to speak out against identity politics.
Don't vote for me because I'm a woman. Don't vote for me because I'm brown. Vote for me because I love this country and because I would do anything for it. Vote for me because I have a clear vision and have experience working at the top of government and know how to honour the promises that we've made to the British people. But most of all, vote for me because I'm a Conservative. Thank you.
Suella Braverman there. Well, I caught up with Paul Scully, MP, the MP for Sutton and Cheam, and a supporter of Nadeem Zwahi. I spoke to him outside that event yesterday about why he supports Nadeem Zwahi.
I'm supporting Nadeem is he is a doer. He is someone that succeeded in businesses, that succeeded in government, and that's why I want to see exactly more of what he's been doing. He's going to reduce income tax for individuals. He's going to suspend the green levies on people's fuel bills because we want to see that support now, but also corporation tax on companies and getting out of the way for businesses because we have to grow our way out of the economy. So we'll raise the money, first of all, by continuing the reduction of the cost of the state in terms of the administration of the civil service, but also by raising more taxes by cutting them in the first place to allow businesses to invest, to grow, and that in this way will grow our way out of the cost of living situation.
Nadeem Zwahi has said that he wants to reduce the cost of running departments by 20%. Now, some journalists have taken that as if he wants to cut the NHS by 20%, as if he wants to cut the army by 20%. Is that true?
It's not true. Now, what he's doing is continuing in...
Well, Paul Scully, sorry for cutting him off a little bit there, but after that even, it was the launch event of Sajid Javid that we scuttled over to at the Cinnamon Club in Westminster. We attended his official launch. It was interestingly in the same room that Andrea Leadsom launched her campaign back in 2016, if anyone remembers that. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, who of course resigned as Health Secretary and kicked off this whole rigmarole. Well, I had a chance to put a question to him after his speech. Let's have a little listen to that.
Beyond the number of departments that you have run and the fact that you'd quite like to cut taxes, why should more Conservative MPs back your candidacy?
We need people at the top that can help bring people together, unite people, and as well as delivery, make sure that we have a good offer at the next election. If you can't get those basics right about the functioning of government, your policy ideas could be great and you can be a great talker and all of that, but if you can't get things done, it doesn't work. And in the departments that I've run, I've got things done, and I believe that's an important factor in this election.
I thought that was a really interesting answer from Sajid Javid. Of course, he's running in the same lane as so many other candidates in this election. Everyone seems to expect that Rishi Sunak will be the candidate to beat, one of those that goes through to the final two. The others are all competing to see who will be the anti-Rishi candidate, who will be the change candidate, the candidate who can cut taxes. And by asking Sajid Javid what makes him different, there are other candidates, of course, who have run government departments. Liz Truss has run many different government departments, as indeed Nadeem Zwahi has been in cabinet as well. Sajid Javid running many cabinet departments, all of them promising to change direction and cut taxes. What made Sajid Javid different? It was interesting, him mentioning not the style, not the substance, but the way that you get things done, the relationship between a Prime Minister and a Chancellor, the relationship between a Prime Minister and a Chief of Staff, talking about how David Cameron actually managed his number 10, and whether you agreed with his agenda or not, he did get things done in a minority party in the Commons. It seems quite extraordinary that the 2010 to 15 Parliament, if anything, has felt more stable than the subsequent parliaments we've had when the Tories had fewer seats than at any point before. So to some extent, that managerial argument is compelling. However, of course, there are other tax cutters in this race as well. We'll be hearing more from the campaigns of people like Liz Truss, someone who is being tipped to potentially get through to that next round, and someone else who appeared to be doing really rather well yesterday was Penny Mordaunt. She topped the Conservative Home website survey of membership in terms of who they would most like to see as their next Prime Minister. She's become a favourite of Tory members, of course, with a breadth of ministerial experience under her belt. Well, let's speak now to someone who is supporting her leadership campaign. Bob Seeley is the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight. Bob, what attracted you to Penny Mordaunt?
Morning, Tom, and good morning to your viewers. I think we need a recognisably Conservative government because that's what folks voted for, and that's what many of the viewers of GBNews voted for. But we also need somebody who is personable and somebody who has got cut through and can have a good chance of delivering victory. And so for that combination between a Conservative, a proper Conservative, and somebody who can deliver victory, I think Penny is our best bet.
Interesting seeing the support amongst the Tory members. That's clear, that's strong. Is there enough support amongst Conservative MPs, though? Because that's the first part of this process. Penny is, I believe, on 20 supporters now, so she'll get nominated. But the question is, will she be able to get... she's more than... Are you suggesting she's on more than 20 supporters? Sorry, Bob.
I thought she was up to about 26 now, but I mean, I think privately, because Penny's very popular with her colleagues, we hope that she will pick up en route. It's not going to be, it's not going to be a perfect journey, but we expect to pick up many supporters as we go, as other candidates, very good candidates, drop out. So she's a healthy second, and I'm very much hoping that she can get to the final two. And Tom, if she gets to the final two, I think she will win.
That's a really interesting prospectus because, of course, we've been speaking to your colleague Andrew Bowie earlier in this programme, supporting Rishi Sunak, widely considered to be the front-runner in this race. Rishi Sunak's argument today, and he'll be launching his campaign in just over an hour's time, is that what everyone else is saying in this race, what the likes of Penny Mordaunt, Sajid Javid, Nadeem Zwahi, what the likes of Liz Truss are saying, is fantasy economics, that tax cuts are unachievable at this stage. What's your response to the former Chancellor?
OK, firstly, I'm not going to indulge in any negative comments about other candidates, because one of the things I actually quite like about this race is that, I mean, for me, all the candidates are incredibly strong, and there are many. Rishi, Liz, I think Liz is great, Penny, Saj, I think there are lots of great candidates, so I'm not going to speak ill of any of the other ones. Penny, in an article which I recommend to all your viewers to go and read in The Telegraph, was arguing about the importance of sound money, was arguing about the importance of getting the cost of living down for folks, making sure we deal with inflation. So she understands the immediate pressures on family budgets and households, but she also understands that we need to get the economy going. And yes, look, there is always room for tax cuts, depending on what else you're willing to slim down in terms of government expenditure to pay for that. So to say tax cuts are impossible at this stage is not true. But there is a wider argument, Tom, and that's about dealing with inflation, which is absolutely critical. Every viewer of GB News is going to be 10% poorer, by the end of this year or next year because of the inflation that we have, and that is going to impact on people's cost of living. That is absolutely critical that we get that down. So Penny is arguing for sound money, getting down inflation, dealing with the cost of living, and then long-term investment in infrastructure. So in places like the Isle of Wight, more levelling up projects, more training, more education projects to drive innovation, to give everybody a great start and a great opportunity in this country. So I don't quite buy we can't do anything now, we just have to tax and spend like we've been doing. no. I think we can make a slightly different approach. But Penny's argument, absolutely, you need sound money to deal with inflation. You need to tackle the cost of living, because that is what our folks, whether they're Conservative supporters or they're folks out there, your viewers, that's what they want us to deal with. We live, Tom, just very briefly, if I may add, we live in a frankly, a dangerous world at the moment. We have an economic and political global crisis, not only in inflation, but in the Ukraine war. We need experience to deal with that, and we need somebody who understands the scale of the problem, and I think, for me, Penny does that best.
Now, Bob Seeley, you're a man who's been involved with the military in the past. Has this influenced your backing of Penny Mordaunt, a Royal Navy reservist, someone who has served or has served this country? Does that influence your support for this candidate?
A very good question, Tom. I mean, a little bit, because Penny's got a great service record and great service history. I think her dad and granddads are in the Paras. She's a working-class girl from Portsmouth. She's a naval reservist and an officer in the Naval Reserve. For sure, that's important. I wouldn't overplay military roles. I mean, I did the last 4 tours, so Syria, Libya, Afghan, Iraq. I don't base my ability to do a job here based on what I've done in the past, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. I'm proud of my record, and people who've served should be proud, because it's a great thing to have done that and a good thing to have done that. But actually, with everyone here, once you're in Parliament, you need to look forward to what you can do in the future and the skills that you bring to the table in terms of leadership, or in terms of being able to support a leadership candidate and work with them to try to deliver that victory for them, because that's what you believe in.
Now, one of the criticisms of Penny Mordaunt has been that in the past she's taken what some people might describe as more woke positions on various issues. She's been stronger in her support for LGBT rights than, for example, other candidates have been in this race. Is that going to harm her?
Oh, look, no candidate is perfect, and that might do her some damage with some folks. Actually, that matters to me. Critical theory, in my opinion, is not compatible with liberal democracy. So woke stuff, saying that gender is more important than ideology, saying that women can have penises, you know, I have a big problem with all this. So actually, for Penny knows that is a bit of an issue. I think, to be fair, I think she has been misquoted in a lot of what has been said about her, and I think you will find clarity on that in the next few days from her. For sure, I want us to be really quite firm on biology, and I want us to be quite firm on critical theory, because if you teach people only what separates them, what doesn't unite them, what divides them from others, that is no way for a healthy society to act, because we all need to be caring more about the substance of our character than whether we're gay, or whether we're white, or whether we're female, or whether we're from an ethnic minority. But for me, Penny shares that opinion, and I think that she will articulate that very clearly in the coming days.
Seeley supporting Penny Mordaunt there. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning. Really appreciate your time and setting out that case. Well, another individual who's pulling ahead amongst that membership poll with Conservative Home is the Minister of State for Equalities. That's Kemi Badenoch. Now, she's been putting forward a case that is really quite centring on the culture war and on cultural issues. It's an interesting pitch. She's won support from many members of Parliament, not least the former Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove. Kemi Badenoch yesterday was talking about the really pernicious nature of a piece of legislation that hasn't been widely mentioned in this leadership race so far, the Online Harms Bill. Now, this bill is something that puts forward this notion of content that can be, quote-unquote, legal but harmful, paving the way to make legal speech that's legal offline illegal online. Now, Kemi Badenoch has said this is a profound threat to freedom of speech, and it's a really interesting voice to have in this campaign. She's putting forward her case, and we'll be speaking to, in just a moment, someone who is supporting her case. Of course, the original Red Wall MP, someone who was elected for Mansfield back in 2017, is Ben Bradley. Now, he declared his support for Kemi Badenoch pretty early on, and it will be very interesting to hear what exactly his support is based upon. We've heard a lot on the cultural side, does Kemi Badenoch have the economic policy as well? I'm delighted we can go to Ben Bradley right now. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben. I suppose, first of all, what attracted you to Kemi? Does she have the experience to lead?
Well, I think she does. You mentioned economic policy there. Of course, she's been a minister in the Treasury for a significant period of this Parliament, so I think she certainly does understand that. But the thing that really attracts me to Kemi is her values, her bravery on those some difficult conversations where she's been Equalities Minister in particular, and she's laid out her clear set of principles and values, her clear views on these things that I think chime with the common sense views of my own constituents and myself. And the fact that she has always been willing to be what I always talk about as being a signpost rather than a weather vane, right? I am what I am, this is what I believe in, and this is the direction I'm going to go, rather than reacting to the daily newspapers, as I think we've been guilty of for far too long, really makes me think she's the right person that could step up and do this.
Got some very strong support amongst the party membership, but of course it's the MPs that matter at this stage in the process. Does Kemi have a realistic chance of getting through to those final two?
Well, I hope so. I think what she's done already is clearly sparked a conversation. We found in recent days, it was very Westminster bubble, right? But most of the top read articles on some of those regular kind of Westminster things that we dig through, Spectator and stuff like that, have all been about how interesting Kemi is, how she's the answer to so many questions. Lots of people are talking about it. And although she's a fairly new entrant in this, with lots of candidates who've obviously been working at it for a long time behind the scenes, she really has picked up that interest. You mentioned party members. Of course, she was second ahead of Rishi Sunak in the Con Home poll that came out yesterday among members. And I hope that colleagues here in Parliament will recognise that and recognise that for all the reasons I've said and more, members really look to somebody like Kemi as somebody who can change things and make a difference.
I found it really interesting that Kemi mentioned the online harms bill yesterday, this sense of regulating the internet in a way that we haven't quite seen before, of regulating free speech in a way that we haven't quite seen before in this country. Are you disappointed that other candidates haven't taken that stance?
Well, I think some of these things are fundamental. One of the things that she's talked about, and nobody else has as far as I can see, is what is the government for? And that's such a fundamental question to me. You know, we can't continue to grow and grow and grow the state, to grow and grow the tax burden, to talk about tax cuts, but with no sense of what government would have to get rid of in some ways to afford that. Kemi's taken this really back to basics in terms of, you know, government needs to do fewer things and do them better. You can't be all things to all men. And meddling in people's free speech is certainly not one of those things that it should be doing. I'm concerned, and I've been saying to the Whip's office for quite some time, that things like this premise of speech that can be legal but harmful, and allowing you know, American tech firms to dictate what that means and to manage that, is really harmful. It's a really difficult thing to explain to constituents as to how that would even work. Never mind, you know, the idea that if you have a view that somebody in Silicon Valley disagrees with, they can just block it and dictate the tempo that way. That can't be right. And Kemi has spoken out about that. She did a really good speech about it yesterday at a free speech event that has got really interesting coverage. Again, nobody's tackling those fundamental things. What is government for? And what actually, how do we protect the freedom and the choices of people who live in this country? I think that's really important to our voters, actually.
Well, Ben Bradley, thank you so much for putting that case today on The Briefing. Really appreciate your time this morning. We've run to the end of the show there, I'm afraid. Coming up, it's To The Point. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.